All right, we took off last week because we were up in New York working with our business coach, and it was incredibly brain intensive and just didn't really have the time to sit down and crank this out. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about two sections of the Factors of Fat Loss Pyramid at once, and that is small group personal training and metabolic conditioning. Now, it may have surprised some of you in week one when we explained that the common approach of starting with cardio and then adding in something like Orange Theory Fitness, and then maybe from there you seek out strength training, while that is a common approach, is not the most efficient, nor is it, a science-backed approach to losing weight and sparing muscle. And we're going to talk about why that's important here in a second, right? So what we're going to do is talk about the reason why we have the pyramid set up the way that we do in terms of small group personal training, which could just say strength training, metabolic conditioning, which could say, HIIT or higher intensity conditioning, and then low intensity movement on top of that to finish out this series. So if someone wants to lose body fat, right? If they want to lose body fat, not just weight, because you don't really care about losing weight. If you've ever seen someone who dropped a ton of weight, but they just look like a skinnier version of how they looked when they were heavier, I think that makes sense if you've seen, someone do that. Unfortunately, what probably happened is they crash dieted, they dropped a lot of muscle in the process, and they wind up actually still having a higher percentage of body fat in the end. You've probably all heard the term skinny fat. It's a real thing. But the reason why we have small group personal training as the base of our movement portion of the pyramid is because it builds muscle. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going to go out and get bulky, right? I wish it was that easy sometimes, but it's just not. But it's the base of our pyramid because it's going to build muscle. And building muscle is important because that is the only way to increase our metabolism, have our body burning more calories 24/7. So the biggest contributor to daily caloric burn every single day is what's called your RMR, your resting metabolic rate. And while doing things like cardio or going to, some type of HIIT class like Orange Theory or even our metabolic conditioning will burn some additional calories, it's not necessarily going to help build muscle and get you burning more calories every single day, all day. So that's why we start with small group personal training. So as crazy as it might sound, if someone is limited on time, they have, only anywhere from, an hour and a half to 3 hours a week to get in some type of working out, then we would have them start with, in our facility, small group personal training. If they're somewhere else and they were asking for our advice, strength training, because of everything we just talked about. It's going to help increase their metabolism. But once they have more than, the 3 hours, the 2, 3 hours, hour and a half, 3 hours, but especially more than 3 hours, really would focus for fat loss. I really would focus on strength training with some conditioning finishers like we do for up to 3 hours. After 3 hours, that's where I would add in, metabolic conditioning or HIIT type classes. So in our facility, metabolic conditioning, it could be going to something like Orange Theory or another higher intensity interval training type approach, right? And the reason why we go here instead of cardio, again, for fat loss, not necessarily talking about like a pure health approach here, although if someone's ready for it, this is healthy. The reason why we go here for fat loss is because things are done at an intensity that creates and elevates what's called EPOC. So excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. And essentially, it's just the process of our body trying to get back to baseline, and it revs our metabolism for hours post-workout. And if you look at something like our metabolic conditioning classes, we still do have some lower level strength training in there. So you may even still, get a little bit of a muscle building effect in those classes, but definitely a muscle sparing effect, right? Where if we would have jumped to the top of the pyramid with low intensity movement and gone straight to cardio and just, not to take away from anything, but running, biking, long walks, like those are all great things, right? Like I do them and I thoroughly enjoy them. So don't take this, as Chris said, don't go out and do any low intensity movement. It's very good for your heart. It's very good for your mind. It's very good for creativity. And it's really, really good for overall health, and it does assist in fat loss. The problem is we just don't want to make that the majority of our time. So up to 3 hours a week, we focus on small group personal training. If we have more time than that, or really, you know, 2 small group personal training sessions, so maybe you're sitting at like a little over 2 hours there, then you want to add on a metabolic conditioning, however many of those you would like, cool. And then, you know, all of this kind of happens concurrently. We do want to make sure we're getting in lots of low intensity movement throughout the week. So it could be things as simple as parking your car further away at the grocery store, setting a timer at your desk at work to get up every 15 minutes and move around, go for a walk, do some air squats, push-ups, whatever, but just lower intensity movement isn't really going to tire you out. But if our goal is fat loss, we do want to spare muscle in the weight loss process so that we can keep our metabolism high, and we're going to like the outcome much more than if we focus on cardio and just drop weight and tank our metabolism, okay? So that's why we have Factors of Fat Loss pyramid with small group personal training or strength training, followed by metabolic conditioning or, you know, HIIT style training, higher intensity training, and then low intensity movement on top of that. All right, talk to you guys soon.